At 11:34 p.m. on New Year's Eve, while the world was counting down to a celebration, the CME Group was counting down to a default. While you were watching a ball drop in Times Square, they were hitting the delete button on the physical silver market. I am talking about an 8-page emergency filing that legalized the theft of your assets before the sun even rose on 2026. The Chicago Fed just flew to Shanghai to beg for a bailout, and they came back with an empty plane and a dial tone. The paper era just ended. Here's the data they hoped you'd be too distracted to notice. The 48-hour warning I gave you this afternoon, it just collapsed into 8. Confirmation is coming in from port authorities in Shanghai that as of 11:47 p.m. local time, they began rejecting silver cargo destined for COMEX-approved vaults. This isn't a drill. The default clock didn't just strike midnight. It broke. China didn't wait for the January 1st export restriction laws to kick in. They enforced them early. Right now, the ports are dark, the cargo is sitting on the docks, and the COMEX is about to open on January the 2nd with a physical delivery problem that cannot be solved with paper. This is the event horizon. This is the moment the synthetic pricing mechanism disintegrates because the underlying asset is no longer available at any price. Here's what happened in the last 12 hours while the mainstream media was feeding you fluff. At 2:14 p.m. Eastern yesterday, a private jet left JFK. The passenger manifest was redacted, but our sources on the ground confirm it was a high-level delegation from J.P. Morgan's Commodities desk and 2 representatives from the CFTC. But here now, the detail that should keep you up at night. The Chicago Fed was on that plane. Why is the Federal Reserve involved in a private commodities negotiation? Because this isn't about silver, it's about system stability. They landed in Hong Kong at 6:40 a.m. and were in a conference room at the Shanghai Futures Exchange by 9:15. The offer they threw on the table was a Hail Mary, an emergency purchase of 50 million ounces paid in U.S. Treasuries using a bilateral currency swap to bypass the SWIFT system. It was desperation dressed up as diplomacy. Beijing looked at the offer for exactly 37 minutes. Then the head of the PBOC Metals Division said, no. Not negotiate, not we need more time, just no. Let's look at the math the banks are trying to hide. Right now, the exchange has 12,000 active contracts for January delivery. That's 60 million ounces of silver that must be delivered in the next 30 days. The registered inventory at the COMEX was 41 million ounces. But 23 million of those ounces were scheduled to arrive from Shanghai refineries this week. Those ships are now frozen at the dock. Do the math. 41 million minus 23 million leaves you with 18 million ounces of actual metal. You have 60 million ounces of demand and 18 million ounces of supply. That is a 70% shortfall. This is why the CME Group issued that emergency rule change at 11:34 p.m. Under the obscure heading of force majeure, paragraph 4, subsection C, they have officially authorized the clearinghouse to mandate cash settlement at the prevailing paper price. They are pre-authorizing a default. They are creating a legal framework to pay you a check for $30 an ounce while the physical metal is trading in Shanghai for $89. That is a $59 spread. That is not a market. It's a crime scene. And while you were watching the ball drop, the Fed was already pumping the crime scene with $34 billion in emergency repo liquidity, an 850% increase in 48 hours. The plumbing is bursting, the collateral is gone, and the synthetic era is officially dead. As the sun rises on 2026, the mainstream media is already preparing the anesthesia. You'll hear Bloomberg talk about logistical bottlenecks. You'll see a CNBC anchor smile and blame holiday volatility. They will do everything in their power to prevent you from looking at the one number that matters, the spread. On the COMEX, as of the last tick, silver is priced at $30.20. In Shanghai, the physical reality is trading at $89.14. That is not a price difference. That is a divorce. In a functioning capitalist system, this gap is impossible. If I can buy a widget for $30 in New York and sell it for $89 in Shanghai, I will do it until the prices equalize. But you can't, because the $30 silver in New York doesn't exist. It is a digital hallucination. It is a claim check on a coat that the coat check girl already sold to someone else. The $89 silver in China, that's the real stuff. And China just told the world they aren't accepting paper claim checks anymore. The Lehman 2.0 cascade. Let's pull back the curtain on the banking sector. Why did the Fed and JPM panic fly to Shanghai? Because they know the math. When a bank like JP Morgan shorts silver on the COMEX, they aren't just betting on a price drop. They are acting as the liquidity provider. They sell contracts to hedge funds, pension funds, and retail investors. To hedge that risk, they buy derivatives from other bullion banks. This works perfectly as long as the price is suppressed and the metal stays in the ground. But the moment the physical supply vanishes, the moment the delta hedge becomes impossible, the entire 230 billion derivative tower starts to lean. If the COMEX is forced to default on January 2nd, every hedge fund that bought silver as insurance against a crashing dollar is going to realize their insurance policy is written on a napkin. They will demand their $230 billion, and the banks, they don't have it. The $34 billion the Fed injected into the repo market wasn't a year-end adjustment. It was a defibrillator. They are trying to keep the heart of the banking system beating long enough to figure out how to tell you that your paper assets are worth pennies on the dollar. The end of the synthetic era. We are crossing the event horizon. For 40 years, the West has controlled the price of resources through the synthetic pricing mechanism. We told the world what gold, silver, and oil were worth because we owned the exchanges where the paper was traded. China just ended that era by enforcing the export ban early, by rejecting the Fed's treasury swap, which, let's be honest, is just trading one form of paper for another. Beijing has signaled that they no longer value American debt over physical atoms. They are keeping the silver. They are keeping the collateral. They are letting the COMEX burn. What happens when the market opens? On January 2nd, the force majeure rule change will be triggered. You will see the most chaotic opening in the history of the commodities market. The check in the mail. Retail investors will be told their physical delivery requests are denied. They will be cash settled at the fake $30 price. The institutional gamma flip. Large institutions will realize the paper market is a tomb. They will flee to anything tangible: gold, copper, land, lead. The banking blackout. Within 72 hours, the derivative losses will hit the Tier 1 banks. Watch the Standard & Poor's Bank Index. If that line starts to vertical drop, you know the $34 billion blood transfusion failed. The media will tell you to stay calm. They will tell you the system is resilient. They said the same thing in September 2008. They said the same thing while the boilers on the Titanic were exploding. The default clock didn't just strike midnight, it broke. The phone is off the hook in Beijing, the metal is on the docks in Shanghai, and the paper in your brokerage account is about to face its day of reckoning. This isn't a drill. This is the moment the world remembers that you cannot eat, build, or defend a nation with paper promises. The physical world is back, and it's demanding payment in full. The mainstream media is going to spend the next 48 hours telling you to ignore your own eyes. They'll call this a glitch or temporary volatility. But you and I both know you can't print silver and you can't build a future on paper. Promises that China just lit on fire. The synthetic era is over. The physical era is here, and the window to position yourself is closing faster than the gates at the Shanghai port. If you want the raw data the banks are trying to bury, the real-time repo numbers, the force majeure updates, and the deep dive analysis into the $230 billion derivative collapse, then you need to be part of this circle. Subscribe to Gold to Silver Affairs right now and hit that notification bell. In a market moving at this speed, being 2 hours late isn't just an inconvenience, it's a total loss. Drop a comment below. Are you holding physical metal, or are you still trusting a bank's claim check? I'll be in the comments section tonight breaking down the CME's fine print. Like this video to help us bypass the algorithm and get this warning to those who still have time to act. This is Gold to Silver Affairs. I don't give financial advice. I give intelligence. Stay sharp. The floor is gone.